One of the most beautiful parts of modern plants are their flowers. Having evolved approximately sometime around 145 million years ago, these reproductive structures are fragile and ephemeral, growing from buds to blossoms before serving as the genesis site for a fruit. The flower, as a brightly colored and sweet-smelling organ, is able to attract pollinators like bees, butterflies, and the like. These animals all come in search of nectar, and as they dig around the flowers for it, they'll get coated in pollen. And as they travel from flower to flower seeking nectar, they'll inadvertently exchange pollen. Some will get rubbed or shaken off at a new flower, and it'll help the plants reproduce. When the flower has been pollinated and it starts producing a fruit, the flower itself begins to wilt and fall apart. Now that its part has been played, the tissue can be discarded. Because flowers are so soft, so fragile, and relatively quick to die and dissolve, they're really rather rare in the fossil record. They're very underrepresented. Our understanding of early flower evolution is subsequently pretty poor. Flower fossils, especially older fossils, tend to spark lots of discussion and excitement when they're discovered, because they can have an outsized impact on our understanding of the evolution and ecology of flowers, of angiosperms. Well, this brings me to today's science news. 2 specimens of blooming flowers, preserved in amber for about 99 to 100 million years, have been discovered in Myanmar. A new paper analyzing the discovery has been published in the journal Nature Plants. Lead author of the paper, Robert Spicer, also professor emeritus at the Open University in the United Kingdom, gave some context on the newly discovered 99-million-year-old flower, saying, quote, "Leaves are generally produced in larger numbers than flowers and are much more robust. They have a higher preservation potential. A leaf is discarded as is at the end of its useful life, while a flower transforms into a fruit, which then gets eaten or disintegrates as part of the seed dispersal process." Unquote. These 2 new flower species have been named the Eophylica priscitellata and the Phylica pyloburmensis. This latter flower, the Phylica pyloburmensis, belongs to the same genus as Phylica flowers found in South Africa today. Comparing the ancient and modern Phylica flowers, Mr. Spicer said, quote, "These particular flowers are almost identical to their modern relatives. There really are no major differences." Unquote. Now this is really interesting because if this ancient flower is so similar to modern flowers to its modern descendants, it suggests that flower evolution, at least for this clade, involved a burst of diversity that rapidly settled on stable phenotypes or stable platforms, and these stable forms have persisted for at least 99 to 100 million years. This ancient Phylica flower, with its fruits, leaves, pollen, and petals almost unchanged from its modern descendants, is evidence of this. It's strong evidence in support of the punctured equilibrium evolutionary hypothesis. It's quite possible that these flower specimens are from earlier on in this process, perhaps shortly after a stable form had been evolved and had begun to spread. Mr. Spicer said, quote, "These exquisitely preserved flowers, fruits, leaves, and pollen from 100 million years ago provide a snapshot of an important time in the evolution of flowering plants, showing that early flowers were not primitive, as many people suppose, but were already superbly adapted to survive the frequent wildfires that ravaged the warm greenhouse world of the Cretaceous." Unquote. He also said, quote, "Here we have preserved in amber all the details of one such early flower, just at the time when flowering plants begin to spread across the globe, and it shows superb adaptation to seasonally dry environments that supports vegetation exposed to frequent wildfires." Unquote. Okay, so this last detail is really important because it touches on the evolution of this particular flower form. The ancient flower, as well as its modern Phylica relatives in South Africa, all inhabited dry, semi-arid landscapes prone to wildfires. Mr. Spicer said, quote, "If many of the early flowers were exposed to fires in such semi-arid landscapes, it explains why the early phases of angiosperm evolution are so poorly represented in the fossil record. Fossils do not normally form in such semi-dry environments." Unquote. Now it's also really interesting to think how this relatively static state of the flower can be reconciled with evolutionary pressures from pollinators. As Mr. Spicer explained, quote, "Flowering plants reproduce more quickly than other plants, have more complex breeding mechanisms, a wide variety of flower forms, for example, often in close collaboration with pollinators. This drives mutual coevolution of many lineages of plants and animals, shaping ecosystems." Unquote. So if you consider the influence of pollinator animals and the frequent wildfires forcing counter-adaptations, it's really impressive to see that this ancient Phylica flower had achieved a sturdy, robust form that has persisted against all of these influences and pressures for nearly 100 million years. It's a testament to the efficacy and durability and the importance of these traits for fire tolerance that they've been preserved this whole time. Mr. Spicer also said, quote, "On the sustainability front, it is worth remembering that as fires become more frequent in our warming world, we may be able to learn a lot from learning back to a time when wildfires were so frequent that they shaped the evolution of the group of plants that dominate much of today's world vegetation." Unquote. Alright, so there you have it, a really cool discovery of an ancient fossilized flower, shedding some insight into the earliest stages of the evolution of angiosperms.